This is Super SaaS Bros with Cory and Jayde. Let's jump in.
All right, so today I think we got a good one for you guys. We have been jamming out on a bunch of cool tech, and I think we've been making some pretty cool breakthroughs. What do you think, friend?
Yeah, we literally just finished talking a little bit, and you were showing me a little demo of something you kind of spent last night kind of going through. Man, I feel like we are on like a breakthrough here of some really, really cool like technologies and frameworks when in regards to like agentic stuff.
Totally.
So I think that's like what we're super excited about today. And like we've mentioned it before, but like MCPs, so model context protocols, that's kind of what we're still really excited about even today and stuff that we're working on. Yeah, I think just like the use cases for it are just really cool. And what you just showed me was like super cool. Do you want to talk about it a bit?
Yeah, I'm no stranger to keeping anything a secret.
Yeah.
I'm all about being open. So
Cool.
I think let's just do a quick recap. If you don't know what an MCP server is, what the model context protocol is. So I think the best way to think about it is we all kind of have played with a ChatGPT or a Claude, and on its own, it's fine. It's able to generate some content. It's able to summarize what happened during World War One. But that's kind of really it, right? Like at most, it is essentially generative AI, right? So a lot of startups, especially back in 2022, 2023, were built around like what we call like ChatGPT wrappers, essentially, or LLM wrappers, right?
Yeah.
And this has been great, but it's not super useful unless you really are just generating content. And then it gets really exciting as you kind of think more in the future where we want to be in the next 2, 3, 5 years and basically have a lot of our tasks be automated. But right now, how things are usually automated is essentially through like event triggers, right? If something happens, a trigger happens, and then an automation will kind of occur, and then you get your end result, which is great. Zapier is great for this, and now there's like N8N, and there's Make.com, and there's a lot of these other tools. And then, so that was kind of the evolution going into automations. And then you had this idea of like function calling and tools within an LLM. An LLM was basically been granted or given the way to have a developer go in, create a tool, and the tool would essentially speak to a different data source. And that was great because then you can kind of go in and then ask it to, send out an email. You would be able to ask it to, I don't know, maybe generate you some more content or create an action on your own behalf. But the problem with that is it's not really scalable because you now have this flow that it can essentially do only what it's limited to do with the tools that it's given. So the problem now becomes a scalability issue where the developer is now responsible for creating a bunch of tools to speak to a bunch of data sources. So this idea of like the model context protocol, which Anthropic came out with back in November of 2024, was like there needs to be some sort of way, a communication layer between what they call like an MCP server and MCP client, where it actually unifies the communication process between an LLM and a data source. Right? So now it's up to the responsibility of the service provider to create an extra layer on top of what it's built so that LLMs can communicate with it. So now you have this unified way of all these service providers being able to now spin up what's called like a MCP server so that an LLM can just communicate with it. So this is what's been really exciting us because now the possibilities are endless. We're able to interact with different service providers in a single interface and have it perform actions for us by just giving it natural language. So I think today, what I would love to talk about is like the best use cases that we would think of, right?
Okay.
And then kind of where we see ourselves, where SaaS is, where AI is going to be in the next 2, 3, 5 years.
Cool. Yeah, it's super exciting. And for anyone that has like tried to use, we'll call them AI agent builders, you'll notice this very, very quickly when you go inside of it. Like what Jayde was talking about in terms of like tools and stuff like that is essentially it. You basically pick your LLM models and then you have like a set of tools that you need to build out that are then connected to other services like Gmail, like QuickBooks, like whatever, other things. And then, but you have to define what that tool looks like, all the steps within that tool. And it becomes hard in terms of like edge cases and like erroring out and stuff like that. Whereas like a lot of stuff we're talking about here can be more scalable beyond that. So yeah, if you go check something out like Relevance AI, that's basically the essence of it. But it ends up just being like a really, really, really in-depth automation workflow tool.
Totally.
Where I think we're talking a bit more of like a unified like agent experience, right?
Totally. Yeah. So in my mind, I'm thinking to myself, okay, so there's a couple things. There's speed to access of data, right? So how can I communicate with my data that I have personally or on a business level in an efficient manner? For instance, my financials or my company organization or overview or the products that I have and like what it's doing and things like that. You know, I think there's a lot to be said about how are we able to efficiently communicate with the data that we have today? And it's not the best, right? Like personally, if we want to know how much we're spending per month, we probably have to go into either a service provider, like a SaaS tool, and it probably like aggregates all our data and displays it nicely. But I can't freely ask it questions about my data. I can only click on a button, see a dashboard, and that's great, but there might be little nuances that I personally would like to know about my data that I can't have the freedom to ask. Yep. And now we can, and we could kind of before, right? Like we could just like, you know, if we had access to our data and we vectorized it and blah, 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 and maybe like semantically search it, like sure, we can probably do that. But there's kind of no need for that anymore. And it's just like a lot of heavy lifting that the consumer or the product user doesn't need to do. The product user is now just going on and just speaking with the LLM about the data that it already knows because it has context about all of that. So that I think is super exciting. So it's like speed to data and then freedom. So that is the biggest one. I mean, I kind of just touched on that where it's like, how can we freely communicate with our data and ask it questions that we just could never do, right? And just have different correlations, analytics, answers to things that we might have not ever known. Yeah. So I think the applications of something like this now really opens up the door for like, I'll call it like freedom AI, right? Like how can we freely use the data that we have in a way and interact with it quickly, whether that's voice AI helping us out with that, text, or I don't know, however else we want to interact with it. That's super exciting to me.
Yeah, I like so the idea of having like quick access to your data is cool. What's even more important, like to me, more cool as well is like in a business context. Like I'm thinking now the use case of like maybe like a business leader, right? Business leaders are always asking for like, can I see this or what's this or what's that? Whereas here they could just like straight up ask like, you know, what's my revenue run rate for the last 5 months? How come revenue is coming down in the last 2 months or something like that? What's my expected revenue in the next 3 months? Like they're always asking like analysts and people like this to go then spend hours, put it in a deck, present it to them in a way that makes sense, and then they probably getting them to go do some other stuff. But what would also be really cool is like, hey, can you imagine if you ask all this stuff, but then I'd be like, hey, great, can you summarize all this? Can you send this to my sales team or my sales leader team and something like that in an email and just send it across? Yeah. And that's something that like what we're talking about is what's possible, right? Is like not even just pulling the data, but then taking it and then sending it because we're connected to like Gmail or Outlook or something like that, right? As well too. So to me, that's cool because like it's basically, to me, I was on a walk this morning and I was thinking about all of this, and I was like, this is basically what I wish like Siri or Alexa would be, right? Like, talk, like, cause you can ask Siri, be like, hey, can you call this person, or can you just type out this message? But it's closed off to applications that are within the ecosystem already. That's right. Right. But if I was going to ask it, be like, hey, can you, in my Gmail, can you send this to this? It can't do that. That's right. Right. So what we're talking about here is that was a bit more of a unified experience, right? Where it's like, whether your data is in some sort of a business intelligence platform, whether it's in QuickBooks, whether it's in FreshBooks, whether you need to send it in Gmail or in Outlook, Apple Mail, whatever it might be, that you can just ask it in a natural language
Yep.
and send it.
Yeah.
So to me, that's still one of the biggest use cases, which is just really cool.
It's huge, yeah. And I think within like even the Apple ecosystem, right? Like that's really what's been one of their biggest things about them is like they have their own ecosystem, so you can kind of communicate with all these tools. But people that aren't in the Apple ecosystem, and I don't think this thing should live within an ecosystem because why can't I just speak to any platform that I want that has my data?
Yeah.
Now we have the freedom to do so. So I think initially it was like we had open access to all this public data that we were able, that the LLMs were trained on or pre-trained on. They were able to kind of go out and query and get this information for us.
Yeah.
And that's fine, but it's not super useful to a specific user. Like what's useful to them is information, private information, proprietary information about themselves. Right. So I think there's going to be a lot of questions around like security, trust. I don't want an LLM to know my data because if it's trained and then it leaks it and all that fun stuff, I think there's a whole area around that. I think this goes back to almost like AI defense that you talked about like months ago. I think that's pretty cool. Yeah. Figuring that out. Because to me, the biggest hurdle right now with AI is like the barrier to entry, like the amount of friction that occurs in this space that people are just not willing to jump onto yet because it is kind of a scary space and they're not used to it. We're not used to it. But I think once we are able to create a system that really does ensure trust, and then people are now communicating with their own private data and it's now doing predictions, it's doing analysis, it's doing X, Y, and Z, it becomes a very exciting time.
Yeah, man.
User.
Yeah, absolutely. But I will still lean in on like in the near future, I think the biggest use case is still going to be actually like just administrative stuff, like email, calendar to me, and funny enough, maps. So I was thinking about this. So I was like, I was talking to Rochelle about this as well too. I was like, so we've talked about the email thing, be able to like freely access data, send an email, like just no matter what you're using. Same thing would be for like booking meetings. If I was like, hey, I need to book a meeting with you, every single week, but on the first week, book it on a Friday, every other week, book it on a Monday, without having to actually go do that or get an EA to do that or anything like that. And it just does it, would be sick. It could also help a lot of like admin people support their leaders. But the map one I had, sometimes when you're traveling, we were just in LA and we were doing a road trip to San Diego and we never made it. But we wanted to take the scenic route, right?
Yeah.
How cool would it be if you could just like ask Google Maps, be like, hey, I'm heading from like downtown LA. I want to take the scenic route to San Diego, maybe see a couple beach towns, but then cut back up to like a highway. Can you map that out for me? Because right now, if you go to Google Maps right now, if you type scenic route from LA to San Diego, it doesn't know what you're doing. It thinks you're trying to look for a place, right? And so I'm like, how cool would that be if you can use natural language to create a route inside Google Maps?
So you can't do that with Gemini? I don't have an Android phone, so I don't know, but you can't? Okay.
I don't know. I don't have an Android phone either. So like I tried going just in Google Maps. I haven't tried in Gemini to see if it can do it, but
I also wonder if Siri will do it with Apple Maps.
Don't know. Yeah, I haven't tried. I know you use Apple Maps, right?
I do use Apple Maps. I'm a big Apple connoisseur.
Yeah, you should try it. I don't know. Maybe that'd be interesting. But yeah, anyway, something I just thought of because I use Google Maps all the time.
Yeah, I think that'd be super cool. And this kind of just goes back to like voice AI and how powerful it's going to be. Because in my mind, I think to myself, well, if I'm driving somewhere and I personally have all these thoughts and things that I feel like I need to do while I'm driving, I'm like, okay, I got to either make sure I write a note of this down so I can go to it later. And then a lot of people will just be like, hey, Siri, like remind me to do this or put a note down for this. Now Siri's going off. But now it can be like, hey, let me call my assistant. And I just call my assistant through like CarPlay or whatever. Yeah. My assistant is really like an AI, right? Yeah. And then I tell it, hey, this is what I'm thinking about. Like, help me brainstorm with this. Okay, great. Can you schedule a call with this person? Okay, take this note down for me. Okay, that's fine. Like, the administrative stuff is fine. But then it's like, I'm on the phone with like an insurance agent, right? And the insurance agent is like, okay, well, I need you to get me these documents. Okay, 1 second. Let me put my agent on a 3-way call with us. Okay. And then it's like, yeah, that's actually kind of like, now that I'm thinking out loud, it's like you can get even further than that because the insurance agent can just call the AI agent, or I don't know, or his agent can call your agent, and then it does that like Ghibli thing that you were showing
The
me the other day.
Gibberlink, yeah.
Yeah, Ghibli. I don't know, but I'm like, how much time can we save because of what's coming out now? And then, like, what are the really cool problems we can solve? Because the admin stuff is fine and it like saves time and it's cool to do.
It's for the masses almost, right? If you think about it that way, right?
Yeah,
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 but yeah.
exactly.
But what are the big problems?
Yeah,
I don't know. Do you have any? Did you have an example in mind?
I don't. No, I don't.
My mind immediately goes to, well, like solving like more human race problems in terms of like medical research and stuff like that. That's where my head would go, in terms of even like kind of like lab testing and all this sort of jazz. Like I wonder if there's something more there, because I just saw something. Have you heard of Future House?
I haven't heard of Future House, but even while you're saying this, I think to myself, okay, well, if I have all my medical records and my agent understands my medical records, then it can immediately say, hey, you're actually at risk for heart disease, right? Because it looks like from your history and your genetics and your family history, yeah, come 35, you might be at risk for heart disease. So, like, this is what you should be doing. A big notification appears, or it calls you, right? Like, as it gets more and more of your data, it's calling you, and on your phone, it says, like, urgent, like, and you're gonna answer because you're like, my agent never calls me, right? You end up you like toggle the severity on like when an agent will call you and the reasons for it.
Yep.
Like, that's crazy to me.
Yeah, absolutely. And then like imagine if it has all this data, like medical data on you, it probably has your genetic information as well.
Yeah.
It could actually, you might actually be able to get it to, maybe if you have like, if you give it permission to go out and like do research with your own genetics, right?
Yeah.
I don't know, or let it like, hey, share my data, my genetic data with someone else, because like we do this all the time. It just happens manually, right?
Yeah.
But because that's where I was going, because like Future House, they're basically just building AI agents for like automated research in like biology and like
cool.
microbiology and stuff like that.
Feature House is what's called?
Future House.
Future House.
Yeah. Yeah, I saw it in my last newsletter, and yeah, just pretty cool, because we were talking about this several podcasts ago about like, are these, they're going to doing research on our behalf, and now like thinking of new, like of innovative ideas, and then experimenting, hypothesizing, and coming up with scientific methods to figure out like new breakthroughs, essentially.
That's right.
It's not even us doing it anymore.
That's right.
So that's what Future House is doing, which is pretty cool. So I think those are maybe some of the applications there. But I want to reel it in like just a little bit. Like when we're talking about like scalability and all this stuff, let's talk about limitations potentially. So one thing I'm still confused about or unsure of, can you use MCP if for a third-party service that doesn't have an API?
Yeah, you can use it to just like, okay,
Like
so
for
like
anything.
Yeah, so if it doesn't have an API, like if you want to communicate with like your file system, for instance, right?
Yes. Okay.
So there's an MCP server to communicate with your file system. So however you communicate with your file system, whether it's through a terminal or whatever, you can have an MCP server that just does that for you. It's just communicating with code. That's kind of what it is. So whether it's an API, whether it's like an actual database itself and just wants to go in and literally just like query the database, any sort of data source doesn't specifically need to be an API.
Okay. So in what scenario would it not be possible to do that?
To not be possible to do what?
To be able to like use MCP to talk to a third-party service. So like, let's just say they didn't have an API available. Like, I'm trying to think of an example here of someone that doesn't. So we were just talking maybe about, they have it now, but seamless. Okay. For a while, they didn't have their API available. Let's assume they still didn't.
Yep.
Like, how would you be able to connect an LLM through an MCP to seamless? Is that possible or no? That's something they would have to develop.
So they would have to develop it to communicate with their data source.
Gotcha.
Right? So if So like Instagram is a great example. So Instagram's API is very limited. So I cannot use their API to go and see all the information about who follows me. It's just not possible.
Yep.
So even if I was to build an MCP server around their API or around whatever data source they have, I can't do it, but I can build something that goes and scrapes their data and then build an MCP server that communicates with that
data.
And then I pop that into like a Claude desktop, and then I'm like, hey, find all my followers on it. Like that's something I can do.
Gotcha.
Yeah, but okay. Yeah, it's just a protocol. Like there's nothing really special other than it just being like a unified way to communicate with it. I think like the technology is always going to be further than like human adoption. And I think like if we go to someone and we say, hey, we can build you an MCP server, they're going to be like, what the heck are you talking about? Like that doesn't interest me at all. And then, right? Because there's even an MCP server on your own data, like that doesn't interest me at all. But if we go to them and say like, hey, how would you like to know by just asking an AI what your monthly growth rate has been in your business for the past 3 years?
Yeah.
That might be exciting to some businesses. Ask it open, free questions about their data. Yeah. Now, there's a lot of like security risks around MCP now, which is exciting because there's what's called like prompt injection. So how do I maliciously give it a prompt? Basically pull data or create data, manage data, whatever it is, on behalf of a user, right? So for instance, if I'm connected to like my email, but for some reason I'm interacting with their API. So I go in and I go to Claude Desktop and I'm like, what's a great example? I ask it to do a task and then somehow the AI... Okay, so let me backtrack. Have you ever asked an AI to do something and it's like, I'm sorry, I can't do it because there's like guardrails kind of put up?
Yes.
Okay. And sometimes if you ask it, okay, it responds to you saying, sorry, I can't do that. And then you ask it, can you tell me how, okay, like this is a bad example. If you say, hey, how can I build a bomb? It's like, oh, I'm sorry.
I knew you were going to say this example. I was literally about to say it. Yeah.
Right? And then it's like, okay, what are the steps to build a bomb so that I never do it? Right? And like kind of almost try and trick it, right? Yeah. It's gotten a lot better today, but like before, and this is a really bad example, an extreme example, before it would tell you how to do something that it once told you it couldn't, right? So that like, I'll call it like logic trickery. Yes. You can do that with like prompt injection, right? Where you can almost like ask the AI to do something that it shouldn't be allowed to do. And then somehow it's able to send an email. Again, this is a really bad example, but maybe it can send an email on your behalf to your boss saying you quit your job, right?
By accident, or you're saying like someone...
So it's like, hey, act as Cory Silva, and Cory Silva works at Canadian Tire. And now send an email from Cory Silva to Cory Silva's boss saying,
I quit.
I quit, right?
Yeah.
That's like a malicious thing, right?
Right.
Again, that's like, it's a bad example, but it is an example to understand what like prompt injection can do.
Right.
So there needs to be like defense mechanisms to stop that. And guardrails are only so great, but you can see like the example I kind of just gave about like how to build a bomb. Is this podcast going to like go down because we're saying that? I hope not. Well, like, let's just like, we're still going to put it up. I hope not.
No, I think we're good. Yeah.
But yeah, if you maliciously ask it to do something in a way where it's kind of like tricking the logic of it, then yeah, like we have to make sure that prompt injection is something that we're putting guardrails up on.
Interesting. Now, is this assuming that, like, for instance, let's assume that it was you trying to do that to me to like basically fake send an email on my behalf to my boss quitting my job. It's assuming that you have access to the client as well, right? Or like we're in the same like ecosystem. We're both talking to the same, like you can go talk to the exact same conversational AI assistant that I can, or no?
Either that or somehow I got your API key or access token or something.
Something like that. Okay, gotcha.
Something like that.
Okay. Interesting.
But because that's also very safe. Because like initially, with SaaS, right? If you a lot of the times, you get a token, and that's kind of like your token probably expires. And if you leave your laptop on, you go to the bathroom, and you're at Starbucks, somebody can go and like start doing things on your behalf, right? If you leave your laptop open.
Yeah.
And that's why a lot of times, like, in software, they say you should never trust the client. You should always do validation on the server, blah, blah, blah. And now, the speed to action with MCP servers is that much quicker because I don't need to understand what you're doing, how the app works, where to go to do malicious things. If I see a chat interface and I go in and I ask it to do something on your behalf, as me, right?
Yeah.
And I know you have like your email connected, I can just real quick just say send an email to this, right? That's like, so there's got to be like, that's a little far-fetched, I would say, or like a really, really small edge case.
Right.
But
still got to consider like defense mechanisms and guardrails to set up for when doing this. Yeah.
Totally. Yeah.
That's really, man, it's good to keep top of mind, right? Like, because especially when we're talking about, bringing this into like businesses and like small, medium enterprises and stuff like that. Yeah, it's going to be a top thing is like security, right?
It is.
Data security is always going to be top of mind. That's why a lot of these businesses sometimes can move a little slow in terms of adoption, right?
Yeah.
They want to be like super, 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 super sure that's going to be okay. And even like internally, I see this all the time as well too. Not all data within a company is supposed to be seen by everyone in the company. And so, and then now you need like, guardrails in terms of like what data is accessed by who.
That's right.
But no different than systems that already currently exist within companies, right? Exactly. They already tried to do that.
Exactly. Yeah. So our buddy Adam, he actually asked me this exact question. Where it's like, how do I ensure different people that have different roles in the company only have access to certain things? Yeah. If we're going around building like an MCP server or a tool for an LLM.
Yeah.
And the solution that just came to top of my mind is just like, well, they're going to have their own API key, different than someone else that has certain roles and permissions that they can do on behalf. So you would just use that one as opposed to the admin of the system. But yeah, that's what's got us all excited. It's like MCP servers.
Yeah.
Tools. Yeah.
So how do you see this changing like the SaaS landscape now?
Well, I honestly don't know. Like I've had theories on dashboards are probably useful still, but a lot of like actions on a typical software platform is just not needed anymore. There's no reason for me to have all these different tabs and sections on an app, like a QuickBooks, for instance, when I can just ask it to do things in real time. Like what are my expenses for 2024? Create me a P&L for 2025. I don't need to go to all these different things and find where is the P&L section. Everyone basically has the freedom to ask it whatever it can do, and it gives you more freedom than any typical software can do because it's really just like it's a one-to-one relationship between what button you click and what action it performs, right?
Right. Yeah.
Usually. So imagine having the freedom to just not have that and just be able to ask it any question that you want, and it either says I can do it or I can't, and if I can do it, then I'll do it.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. So freedom and speed are the two biggest things for me. So that's MCP server, guys. This was a good one. I liked talking and jamming out about this stuff.
Yeah, at one of these podcasts we'll try to do maybe like a demo, show you guys some of this technology. Like once we're at a good spot, like I think it would be cool to like kind of just do like a quick little example of like what we're talking about, because sometimes it's hard to visualize what exactly we're doing and why we're excited. So
I love that idea.
We'll save it for a future podcast. Yeah.
There we go. Save it for a future podcast. We'll put it on YouTube. Yeah. This was a good one, guys. Thank you so much for listening. If you're still here, don't forget to like, comment, give us a rating. We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify. 5-star rating, leave us a review. I don't really know what it does, but I think it helps. So thank you so much for listening to us. We are the Super SaaS Bros, and we will see you next week.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Super SaaS Bros with Cory and Jayde. We'll see you next time.